Please excuse the weird transition.
I'm getting some background noise from someone there. But, okay, cool. All right. So is everyone's here?
Yes.
Cool. Chesh, you're here? Hey. All right, cool. Give me 2 seconds. What I'll do is I'll hit
¿Cómo estás, señores?
Hey. I'll hit the record button and then I will start it. So really quickly, Steve and Chesh, have you guys ever been involved or ever done a formal business mediation before?
No.
No.
Okay, cool. All right. What I'll do is when I record, I'll just quickly cover what it is, and then we'll try and get it all sorted out. So just so you guys know, this is what I do professionally. So it's I've done a million of these. So bear with me half a second. Okay, so this is recording. Okay, so I'm here to help mediate the dispute between Steve and Victoria. Dapper, Dino and Munya are here as well to witness this. I'm just going to point out that I do this professionally, and although I do this professionally, I am doing this pro bono. I don't expect to receive any form of payment or advantage from either party. It is taking place on a Sunday afternoon for me, so it's ideally if we can try and get to a quick resolution, that would be great. I am a neutral party, but I do acknowledge that I have been involved in streams and do have pre-existing relationships with you both, and that I consider Steve a friend. But regardless of that, this is going to be treated professionally, and I don't believe it will affect my ability to act impartially. If everyone can agree to conduct...
Sorry, my bad. Are we live somewhere?
No. I'm recording this in StreamYards, and afterwards I'll be sending a copy to Steve and Chesh. So this is not going out live anyway.
Oh yeah, because the background said live on the radicals, and I was like, what?
That's just the background I've got. That's just there. No, that's just we're definitely not live. I can promise you that.
Thanks.
So if everyone can agree to sort of conduct themselves respectfully and I think ultimately agree that a resolution is the desired outcome. As I just mentioned, the mediation will be recorded and I'll provide a copy to each of you afterwards. There is an expectation of confidentiality with the recording. It's just for your own use. Both of you will have the opportunity to express a viewpoint and you should both be able to do so uninterrupted. If there is a disagreement or if, say, for instance, Steve Chesh says something and you disagree, afterwards I will ask you what your thoughts are on that. So you will both get the opportunity. I think yelling over the top of each other, arguing back and forth, it's not going to get anyone anywhere. I don't want to use a mute button because I don't think it's appropriate with everyone here. If I have to, I will, but I really don't want to. I'll ask a few questions in the best interest of assisting in finding a compromise. So I'll ask Steve, do you have any questions about what I just said?
I do not.
Okay. Chesh, any questions?
I don't agree with this being for personal use only, and I think that should a need arise, that this ought to be allotted to be made public. And I feel like, given the conversation that happened yesterday, I feel like depending on how this moderation and mediation goes, it's fair that all of the mods who were dragged into this last night deserve to hear what happens.
Steve, do you agree to that?
Not tentatively, no. But we'll see how it goes.
All right.
Well, that's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's fair.
I do not agree with that.
Okay.
I think it's fair.
Hang on. Hey, sorry, Dapper. Sorry. Hang on.
No.
Can we agree to try and resolve it in the interim, and as it progresses, because otherwise it's the end of the conversation, and there's no resolution. And I think we all agree we want a resolution. So can we table that for the moment, but come back to it?
Yes.
I'm okay with that, but I do want it noted that I do not think that's fair.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm happy to say that isn't resolved at this stage, and that we will come back to it for discussion. So, okay. Look, just for transparency, Steve's given me a bit of a background of what's happened. So I've heard from Steve Chesh. I guess the question I'd ask you is, first, what ideally are you wanting to achieve today? And is there anything you want to bring up now?
Nothing in particular that I want to bring up now. The only thing I want to sort of achieve at this point is actually just a mutual understanding, not even necessarily a resolution. If it takes more than one of these, I think that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right. Steve, anything, I guess, what are you hoping to achieve, and anything you want to comment in regards to that?
I'm hoping to achieve a mutual resolution that is equivocal to, or excuse me, amicable to both of us. That is fair and is understandable by both parties involved.
Okay. So, from my understanding, and please, Chesh, correct me if I'm wrong, from what Steve's said, and I guess from what I sort of can ascertain, it seems as though there's a disagreement as to, I guess, payments and ownership of the channel. And also, it seems as though there may have been a misunderstanding in what Steve believes the agreement is and what you believe the agreement is. Is that fair?
I would say that's a fair assessment. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. So as far as what's your understanding as far as the ownership of the channel, Chesh?
50-50 partnership.
Okay. Now, when you say 50-50 partnership, are you talking about a 50-50 as in you both own the channel, or as in a profit share?
Yes, as in it is our channel, as that has been what it was described to me for the past 2.5 years. All
right. And from what, Steve, you've told me, you disagree with that.
That has never been the case. Everybody that has known that it has been my channel that I would have the final say. I'm under the impression that she has always known that. When people ask who had the final say, she would say that it would defer to Steve. She has referred to it as my channel on multiple occasions. She has said that I own the channel and that I have final say. This is news to me. When she was with Reg was completely clear that Steve owns the channel, has 100% control of the channel, but she's being brought in as a partner for the profit sharing. That has always been the last 2 years, for what I understand. This is news to me that it is now changed, and that's why I want the mediation. Because why would I give up a channel that I fought so hard to give any equity out of that?
So I guess what I'd ask both of you is, do you think it's fair to say that, assuming the best intentions for both of you, because I guess knowing you, I don't think either of you would openly deceive the other, can we agree that there's clearly a misunderstanding, whether that's around language, whether that's around expectations, that should have been communicated better? I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
I would say, as of last night, no, I don't believe that is the case.
Okay. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Not for now.
Okay. So I guess to move forward, is there a resolution that we think we can both get to? Because from my understanding, Steve's not prepared to, or the position at the moment is Steve's not prepared to give up any part of the channel. Chesh believes she's entitled to it. Is there a middle ground we can reach on that?
That's why we're here to
I believe
negotiate.
So.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion? And I think it's, and I've got a few notes that, and unless you tell me any different to what I've been told, and please correct if there's anything wrong, Chesh, I've sort of drafted a few things based on how I would normally see a situation like this handled. There is an issue you're both in different countries. So setting up a company is going to be a difficult scenario regardless. I would imagine, because of international business law, generally it would be set up in the US, which opens a million tax complications, in particular for you, Chesh, which you probably would rather avoid. I say that as someone who's not an expert in either American or Canadian taxation, but just as a layman observation. So if we were to say that Steve retains ownership of the channel, but agrees that you are an independent contractor who contracts to him, and Steve, you agree that Chesh is any part of the decision-making process while she's involved with the channel, and even though as the owner you technically have the final say, that any input she provides will always be considered, and where there's a dispute over, well, I guess where you guys are immovable on something, a third party can come in to help resolve it.
I agree with all except for the third party. That exactly what you said was my understanding of our agreement. And if there was a miscommunication, then that's what we're here to work out, because there was no meeting of the minds when we're talking about vastly different things.
Chesh, what are your thoughts?
We had multiple conversations back when Boole was alive about how to build non sequitur into a business. The discussion at that time was that 50-50 between me and Steve, and then a cut equally from each of us to go to Boole, with a situation where all three of us had equal say in what had happened with the channel. With Boole gone, that removed that third-party factor, as well as there was no change in the discussion of things being 50-50 to be discussed between us. Also, I have a recording from last night of Steve agreeing that it was 50-50 and adding a caveat. I have no problems if Steve wants to make changes or adjustments to be negotiated and to be decided on what those may or may not be. I am absolutely okay with making changes as necessary and what's needed for the channel. However, when we discussed with Boole what we were going to structure the business as, what it came down to was Steve told me that I would be 50-50 partner on everything. However, when the business was built, he would bill me as an employee of some kind. That was part of the discussion. So it was a situation where I was told that with the functionality, I would be 50-50 partner for everything. However, on paper, I would become an employee.
Okay.
I was okay with that under the understanding that what was on paper was actually different than functionality, and that no longer seems to be the case, which I find problematic.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, I think we can resolve this pretty easy, but go for it.
All right. So yeah, most of that is correct. I put it as a subcontractor because of, as you said, it would be very difficult to formulate a business. She is a manager of the channel, wasn't an owner of the channel. I've always became full as far as final say. That has never been given to her. I've never said that if there's a dispute, I don't have final say. That was always part of the agreement. I was never going to give that up. I made that very clear to multiple people. I was never going to give up having the final say. Why would I do that? So I don't know where that ever came in. But as you said, because of the taxations and all that stuff, we need to figure out a way to pay her appropriately. And so that was the decision would be more of an independent contractor, which, I would pay her 50% of all residual, all revenue, and then residuals for her time on the channel. We were trying to work out, this was later on, we were trying to work out if she stays for 6 months, she'll get residual for 6 months from the show she did, which is something like that I'm willing to negotiate. But the whole thing was for profit sharing, for the 50%, 50-50 of the profit involved. As far as the ownership of the channel, I've always had 100% of the channel. I've always had final say in the channel. That has never been negotiated. That has never been discussed. And she has always told people, from my understanding, if there's a dispute, I have the final say, that I own the channel. So I don't know where that ever came up that was any different, because this has never been anything but exactly what she has said, as far as she would be paid as, it's not really an employee, it's a subcontractor, but rather than a partner, because I don't know how she does her taxes, but I know how I do my taxes, which I get a 1099 miscellaneous. That has to be accounted for. And if I give her money from that, then I have to factor that in as far as the expenses and the total amount of the net from the gross, because the gross is what you have the income, but the net is after all the expenses plus my initial cost minus any taxation I have on that income coming into me. That's given into her, has to be passed on somewhere down the line. So
just to interject quickly, I don't think you two realize how close you are to actually an agreement here. So here's from what Chesh you've said, an employee wouldn't be the best structure for you, because then Steve would have to charge taxes
correct
along those lines, and you'd probably find you'd have to pay taxes in the US and then
With the math I did, when I actually mathed out the amount of money Steve would actually owe me for the amount of work I've done, I would rather pay the taxes and take the money.
I don't know what that means.
I would rather be an employee with the charging that I did looking at the amount of money that would be owed to me, and I would rather take the hit on the taxes.
I don't know how much. I'm
when
really confused on that.
Hang on. So when you say, so you're talking about work previously done?
Yes, and severance, if we go that direction.
Okay. So if I can make a suggestion that I think is the win-win, I guess it's going back to what was being discussed before. I think the reality is, even under what you said, on paper, Steve would own the channel because that's better for...
I have no dispute of trying to take because there's only one ownership on a YouTube channel. I had no intention of ever saying that you should give that to me because that is the functionality of YouTube. That was never a concession of decision-making ability. On top of it, I think it's a little bit problematic if Steve is taking my respect for his decisions and my earnestness of his friendship as a business decision when I said that I am willing to defer to him. That was a matter of respect, and a matter of respect that I was under the impression was mutual.
So do you think we could, because look, with it's always difficult with partnerships in any kind of business sense, because ultimately there has to be responsibilities for different sections, and I guess responsibilities for decision making. It's you can't always have two clashing, and this isn't just
that would be what a third party moderation would be for, which is what we had initially agreed on when Boole was still alive. When Boole was no longer with us, the third party moved to Reds. When Reds was no longer active, we had yet to decide on a third party, and when Boole had died, I had also suggested that we get somebody else to replace Boole as producer. All of these were rejected.
Red still has some veto power. Red still has input on the channel.
Oh.
So if I can make
if I may interject here, did you communicate that when Reds went offline, did you communicate that to Chesh that Red still has the veto power?
Chesh always knew that he had that ability.
I would be under the
Chesh went offline that he has the veto power.
Yeah, I would be under the impression because there's now that there's an issue of conflict of interest.
Okay, all right. I'll put a suggestion out there. What if we divide different parts of responsibility? So, say for instance, I would imagine artwork is something that, and design of the channel is something that we could say is Chesh's responsibility.
Before we go there, there's something else that I haven't quite resolved yet. I was told that this was going to be a 50-50 agreement. What Steve is now describing to me is not a 50-50 agreement. What was described yesterday was a 50-50 agreement, but I retain 100% control over what happens. This is a matter of not if there's a dispute, I'm just going to do what I want. This was never what the agreement was about. The agreement was about on good faith, and this is not what has been being demonstrated. And this was not what I had agreed to. If we've got a 50-50 issue, there was always a third party that was able to be reliant. And now Steve is asking for 100%, which is a change to what was said as a 50-50, which is now being described as what is not actually a 50-50 deal.
That was never described that way. The 50-50 was for profit sharing. I always said I was going to be in control. I always said I would never give up control of the channel again or any ownership of the channel, period. I've always maintained this to everybody involved. Everybody.
There are two things here that are being confused with. One is the primary ownership of the YouTube channel. You are the owner, Steve. We get it. But 50-50 partnership, meaning in the decision making and the financials.
We're talking about the channel, though, Manya. There's no interest in the channel.
Hold on, let me confirm it with Chesh. Chesh, are you talking about the decision making and the financials?
Yes.
See, I know what she's talking about. Please don't tell me, Steve. Thank you.
Right. This is going to be just to interject. I understand there's other people here as well. It's really difficult to run these mediations if there's multiple voices. I understand what you were saying, and that's all good there. But I guess it's pretty clear that you two won't agree on that point. So rather than look at the past, let's look at moving forward and find something we can agree on.
I actually have a contention with that. I'm fine with moving on for now. Like, I'm fine with that, but I just want something cleared. I've been working for 2.5 years under this assumption, and so if that is different, then there needs to be a decision that is made. Either I was an employee, I was a partner, and now I want to be an employee, or I was a partner the whole time. So one of these things needs to be decided, and depending on what that decision is, will kind of changes a lot of things moving forward. I'm okay to see what resolution can still be come to without making that decision, but that is something that I personally and objectively need that answered.
Sure, no worries. I've made a note of that. So,
thank you.
That's okay. These things are good fun. Okay, so ultimately, the ownership of the channel isn't in dispute. The agreement or what was discussed is in dispute. I don't think we're going to have a meeting of the minds there, whether it's I think we call it a miscommunication, misunderstanding, because that way we can move forward with it. I do understand what you're saying about having done the work for a couple of years, Chesh, and I think that is an important point that we do have to bring up. So as far as if we're able to get something moving forward, can we agree that Steve would be the owner of the channel, Chesh would be an independent contractor to Steve and the channel, and now what we need to resolve is as far as decision making and responsibilities within the channel. Now, I think the best scenario is to split that into responsibilities. So there's certain things that Steve is good at, or Steve can take responsibility for, and there's certain things I think maybe Chesh could take responsibility for. So as I was mentioning, so things like the graphics, the artwork, that would seem to be definitely your domain, Chesh. As far as maybe organising shows, organising guests, and format, I guess deciding what the shows are, that could be something that Steve is responsible for. How does that sit with
That's how it was originally, yes.
I have a little bit of contention before moving on to the distribution of work, simply because there was arguably what Steve might call a meeting of the minds last night. Everyone in that meeting said that this was a 50-50 deal. Now, Steve is going to remain with the keys to the car that is the Non Sequitur Show channel. So it might be better moving forward to discuss this as a business, with the channel being one asset of the business, because you cannot have more than one ownership of a YouTube channel. When I say in one context that, yes, of course, Steve, the channel belongs to you, in regards to anything relating to his lawsuit with Kyle, of course, but when we're working on the channel and I call it our channel, that I have just as many clips of myself saying that. So the context of that matters in what Steve is referencing.
And that was not part of the original agreement. I've always said that I retained complete ownership of the channel. She'd be paid for her work. That's how she wanted it. That's why I set it up the way through her PayPal. That's why I set it up through the taxation, because we couldn't do it as a business, because as you pointed out, I'm in the United States, she's in Canada. So I said, I will just pay you as a contractor. And then you worry about your own taxes, but I have to pay it out of mine. She was quite fine with that. And I'm like, okay, I have control of the channel. I have control of the decision, but she's being paid for her work, which is fair compensation. That is what we discussed. That is the agreement that I wanted to be holding to. Changing it later on to make it sound like I was offering her more than what I actually offered is, to me, not conducive to a negotiation, because that is not the original thing. Why people think that, I have no idea. I don't know what they've been told. I know what I said, and I know what other people have said. And I know what she has told people about this arrangement, which is exactly what we're talking about now. I'm willing to negotiate in fairness to try to make sure that she's adequately compensated. That's the whole goal, to adequately compensation. But if she and I didn't, we talked about very different terminologies last night. That I think there was a miscommunication there. I'm fine with that, but we have to go forward, because I am not willing to give up anything on the channel, period. That's non-negotiable with me. I've always said that. That's not what I maintain. I don't know why people think otherwise. Again, but that's my position.
May
I want her to have fair compensation. Absolutely.
May I clarify something?
Yep.
Okay, so the contention that I'm having and why this has sort of become an issue with this I get to make the decision problem is that when we were discussing financials, Steve was maintaining control of an asset of an amount of money, claiming that I had no say or no stake in that amount, which is not something I ever agreed to. As far as I was concerned, and as far as I understood, it was 50-50 of the channel. Of course, I was never going to ask for control of the channel because there can only be one person, and knowing what Steve has gone through, I was willing to grant that concession. I'm not going to do that to him. I'm not a jerk. I'm not unreasonable. So to say that he's maintaining the channel as owner, yes, of course he is, but that does not mean 100% say to veto. And why would we have somebody such as Reds or Bull that could veto and have veto power and step in as a third party if you were just going to have 100% control anyway? On top of that, why would I agree to give up any control whatsoever and not be an employee or not have any control over the situation? What person in their right mind would say, hey, listen, I will do all of the work, whatever gets thrown at me. I'm only ever going to get paid any kind of what happens to be made by the show, but you get to make the decision on what I'm doing, what you're doing, what I'm wearing on the next show. The problem with this terminology is that if you have 100% say on anything that happens, it means that you can fire me in an instant. This is not fair. And this is never what I had agreed to, nor had I understood. I was respectful to you, and I was very much respectful that, hey, listen, if you had something that you wanted to do and there was a disagreement, I was likely to defer to you because I still viewed this as a respectable thing, that if I had a disagreement, you would do the same towards me. Please do not mistake me being respectful towards you as a friend, and please do not misunderstand me being respectful in that I did not want to cause additional confusion during your lawsuits and during the PR work I was helping you do and doing for you, in that you were in fact the rightful owner of the channel comparatively to Kyle.
Okay.
I just want a quick response.
Yeah, I was going to just really quickly say it's very clear that there's a genuine misunderstanding.
Correct.
Between
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm quite aware of that. And again, maybe I have the same feelings towards that. Don't mistake, my friendship to say that I would ever give up something that I worked so hard to get back, because it was never on the table. That is something that I've maintained from day one,
Steve,
that I was never going to give up. I was never going to give up any of that from day one. And I do believe she was fully aware of that. However, like I said, when I said for the final decision making, only one person can make a decision, a final decision. Only one has that ability, period, in any kind of thing. When I say that Reds or Bull have some veto power, it means they have input. But Reds knows, and if you ask Reds, that when it comes to the absolute final decision, that was going to be mine. Reds is well aware of that, even with his veto power. So bringing that up doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because I've always maintained, even with Reds, that I have the final say.
Steve, I have an audio recording of you saying that in a 50-50 agreement, no person has any power over the other one, and it is equal, and you bring in third arbitration.
In some cases like that, but that wasn't what we decided on from the initial thing.
I disagree.
When I was talking about that, I said, because you had brought it up, I said there are 50-50 partnerships where it is complete across the board, and you require to have a third party. That has never been the case here. And
if I may.
Well, no, let Chris run it, please. Because it's not as confusing.
If I may.
Go ahead. Go ahead. If Chris allows it, it's his.
Chris, please. So it looks like that Chesh is not willing. Whatever you thought was the agreement, Steve, Chesh is not happy with that. She's not going to agree to that. That's very evident.
Okay.
You having 100% say, she's not happy with that because there are concerns, and she has genuine concerns.
And I do as well.
Those are genuine concerns.
So are mine.
Okay, I get that too. So we have to work with this now. You having 100% control of the channel Chesh will and 100% control of the decision making, Chesh is not going to agree to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm getting to. Yeah.
this is where we move.
right.
This is what we work on and we move forward with. That's kind of settled, I think. Chesh, if I may, do you think that's fair? That's a fair assessment, Chesh?
I think that it's fair to say when there was agreement of 50-50 and that agreement was not 50-50, according to him and according to me, we have different understandings of what the agreement was in the first place. The only way to rectify that, and as far as I'm concerned, is to have an understanding of picking one of three things, which I had already described, as well as decide the best way to move forward. Quite frankly, with the way this has been handled, I do not trust Steve as a partner at this point, with the number of clips that I have pulled with timestamps from the number of times I was referred to as a 50-50 partner, having the same deal and conditions as Kyle, not even including screenshots of conversations. I did math about with the amount of work that I have been doing at an average to low of the positions that Steve on recording said that I was doing, comes out to an exorbitant amount of money after this amount of time that has gone by. And at this point, I do not feel comfortable with him having 100% moving forward. He's already said that he's not willing to negotiate on that. He's not willing to work with me on that. That's okay. That's his prerogative. As I said, I never questioned whether or not he would have ownership of the channel itself, because there can only be one owner of the channel. So before we move forward, I think that if we are going to move forward in any kind of business arrangement, we need to decide what I need to be compensated up to this point. I think that's the only fair way to move forward on at least equal footing, because as of right now, this is not equal footing.
The agreement is that she gets compensated for the work she has done on the show, which is the revenue that we brought in for the show. That's all that's going to be, half of that, which is the revenue from the show. That's the only thing she's entitled to, and that's the only thing she will get.
So for last 2 years, you don't think she has done any work?
We have both done, but she's done it on her own channel, which is irrelevant. Work done on the channel means literally live on this channel. That is not.
You know how? Okay, how many
Manya, it's completely.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Sorry,
it's completely absurd. That's not how business is done.
Oh yeah,
Chris, may I please point out that I was working for those 2 years under a false pretense that I was going to be 50-50 in a different agreement than what Steve thought I had agreed to, whether it was accurate, or not.
I think it's fair to say that
we both were, obviously
you were working under a false assumption.
Yes.
Ideally, we resolve this in a way that fixes all of that. Okay, so I'm going to move to something else, because I think there's an overall thing that could resolve this that I do want to suggest. My understanding is part of the... Okay, so actually, before we do that, if I can ask you, Chesh, do you have a compromise suggestion for decision-making?
Steve pays me for the work I do under the agreement that I thought we were moving forward, and then we go forward with either he decides to take me on as a contractor with keeps his 100% veto power, I get a proper job description, and I stick to that proper job description at a fixed rate.
Okay.
To be increased as there are different jobs or things that are added responsibilities, of course.
Yeah. Is it something where we could set up where we say there's a 50-50 profit sharing arrangement? Now, I do note one thing that you did say, Chesh, that was a concern. That was a little bit of a flag for me as well, which was technically Steve could fire you at any time.
Yep.
What if we were to put an agreement in place where there was fixed periods where that couldn't happen?
I would, depending on how that was worded, I might be okay with that. It would have to not exclusive, obviously, because as of almost 2 years, I've been working almost exclusively towards non-sec and towards this agreement that I thought falsely that I was under, as well as which was only restrictive. I don't mean to say that Steve wasn't allowing me to go work other places, by the way. I want to make that very clear. He wasn't saying that I can't go work other places, but the expected amount of work I was doing was that I would be unable to work other places.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
No,
Okay. The only
that's
other
reasonable.
concern that I have is Steve retaining 50-50 as well as, sorry, not 50-50. Steve retaining 100% power over decisions over the show means that if I were to take an agreement that had anything to do with compensation for any even portion of the show, with his 100%, he would be able to make a change on that however he so desired. So we'd have to write in something about that to make that function.
Absolutely.
Lastly, even operating under what Steve has said so far, assuming the most charitable thing that I can, if there was a misunderstanding about 50-50 arrangement for money, because what I understood that it was 50-50 of channel total, meaning total amount of money that would include all AdSense, all Teespring, all Patreon, etc., etc., etc. as a whole. So that would include ad revenue, and that we would have a 50-50 agreement on what happened with ad revenue money that would be considered residual from the time beforehand, because as far as I was concerned, this was a 50-50 split. I have a concern that under operating the way Steve has it set up, he is vetoing my say in where those profits go, even while I'm agreeing with him where I believe that the profits should go.
If Chris, may I interject? Because if that was the case, then she would have to incur half of the expenses, which means that all the money going into it would be going in to pay off the $5,000 over $5,000 I spent on that channel, which she hasn't put in a dime for. So I don't understand anything that she's saying, because it's not anything that we discussed. When if she was a quote 50-50 on the channel itself, I paid $5,000 for the channel, which means I have invested in the channel. She has not put a dime in the channel. So how does that work out? Because all the money coming in from the channel should be putting off that debt if it was that kind of arrangement. That's debt. That's debt. Well,
okay,
it's not. It's not debt, because that's a technical.
It's
expensive.
It's an expense.
Right.
So if we were to say, okay, so there's this amount, we'll call it $5,000 as a round number. So the amount, so there's the dispute over that. This should actually be really simple to solve. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've got this residual amount that's coming in from the time, I guess, prior to you formally being an active part of the channel, or when, like the stuff from before. So this amount is still going to come in every month, and there's also an expense of $5,000. What if we offset, rather than offsetting everything, which would happen in a partnership, which I guarantee, I assume you wouldn't want, Chesh. What if we say that residual amount goes 100% towards repaying the $5,000, anything above and beyond that?
Hey, Chris.
Which is exactly the structure that I told her. That's exactly what I offered.
But once that is concluded, so that debt is paid technically, then everything at that point is a straight down the middle.
That's what I was
Hey,
thinking,
Chris.
yes.
So, and Chesh, you were going to say, yeah.
I never disagreed with the money going there. That was never my contention.
Cool. I think we've got a...
There seems to have been there was contention there.
Yeah,
but,
there was no contention with that. There was no contention with that yesterday. There has never been any contention with that. What I had contention with was you saying that I did not have any right to have a say in where that money went. Period. When I was already agreeing that that money should be going to pay off channel expenses, which, as you just stated, which I agree with, would include that $5,000. That has never been in contention.
I will tell you that there was completely not a meeting of the minds there, because it's not the conversation that she had with me.
I'm more than happy to share that if you would like, and you can come to your own conclusion.
Because obviously she was talking about the residuals, which means that it wasn't going to the expenses, because I had offered when I had suggested, I said in December, the amount that I want to make sure that she's paid fairly. That's the whole point of this, right? Fair compensation. I'm not trying to screw anybody over. That's never been anything that I would ever do. I said for that channel for the December, it made $5 in revenue, which should be split. She said, no, it made $125, rounding up.
I did the math of the entirety.
Which means that it was from the previous month. And I said, well, no, that's going to be paid directly to me. That covers expenditures, and that's supposed to go back in the channels we agreed upon. She's like, no, I still get half of that. This is exactly how I remember that going. If I misunderstood, that's fine. But this is what I'm remembering. And then I was like, well, there's still amount of expenditure here that she did not put a dime into, which means that I took all the liabilities, all the risk.
Okay.
As
Because
of
under the impression that she would be paid for her services, she would be paid as an independent contractor, as she used the word employee, but it's not, but as an independent contractor, and I remain full control of the channel and for decision making. That was the agreement, period.
Chris,
that was the agreement. If we didn't have a meeting in the minds of that, then I don't know what else to say on that. But it seems to be the case that she was not willing to give me $2,500 to buy into that.
Hang on a second,
I have a question about the clarification of that $5,000. Are you not receiving that money back due to your lawsuit from Kyle?
I don't know if I'm ever going to receive a dime from that.
That's not my question.
Yeah.
Is that part of the judgment that you are supposed to receive that $5,000 back from Kyle?
Yes.
Then why would you, are you going to then take that $5,000 once you receive it to Kyle and put it back into the channel and or back to me if that's where we're deciding the money is going? Because it ought to be a 50-50 agreement as to where that money then goes, because that was the contention I was having.
Right now it's an expenditure. If I get
that's
money
not
from
what
him,
I'm asking.
I'm telling you, if I was to get money from him,
Chris, please, that's not what I'm asking.
I would make an agreement to pay you half to pay that amount back. I would be fine with that. But right now,
so just I'm going to be very clear here. So what you're saying is that until such time as this
he's requesting to take
will offset the $5,000, but assuming that Steve gets that $5,000 back, that goes back in, and at which point, so say $1,000 of residuals has gone towards that, the $5,000 comes back in, wipes that debt, that $1,000, bang, half to Chesh, correct?
That would be fair to me, yes.
Okay. Chesh,
why would that not be fair?
I have contention only with that we are not able to communicate with each other at this point.
And I think she's right on that. I think we speak very different languages. I think we speak very different terminology. And it's unfortunate because we work very well together on other shows like Caffeine Corner. But there's too much contention that's not being able to be resolved properly to be able to work together.
I'm also not entire. I am having a little bit of a contention with how this is handled, which may be a separate issue. It may not be. I'm not sure. So I'm going to kind of put it out there and you guys please correct me. But you unilaterally decided to take money to put it into the $5,000 without communicating that that's what you were doing, when, as far as I knew, this was money you were going to be receiving from Kyle. Therefore, this is a situation where you made a decision about money without communicating, while saying I didn't have a right to that money, while saying I had no say to that money, while saying we weren't even 50-50 on any decision made, even in the agreement that you've now at this point agreed was the case. And why are you expecting me to take a cut out of, if we decided that none of this money goes to back into the channel and it goes exactly 50-50, why would it be reasonable for you to decide that I take a pay cut to pay for your expenses early, unilaterally making that decision, when you are already going to be compensated for this money in the first place? And at this point, how am I supposed to trust you that you are going to, one, inform me what was going on, two, we're actually going to put that money back into the channel in the first place after you received it from Kyle? Because at no point have I ever asked you for any single dime over what Kyle owes you, but you're asking me to put in my percentage, which you agreed that I'm 50% on, to I take a hit to pay for Kyle for you.
There would have been no hit because, again, I had said from the very beginning that the ad revenue would be going to pay for expenses and channels, which she obviously agreed to. But unfortunately, I don't think I don't think we had a meeting in mind of what that was going back into. I never asked her for any of the $5,000.
Chris, I don't think Steve is understanding my question.
I am understanding your question, but no, I have a right to respond to this.
Yes, please respond.
Okay, thank you. I had I had told her about the $5,000. Again, this was under the impression that she was being paid as an independent contractor. That's why I didn't ask her for half of it. If we had a full-on 50-50 partnership, as far as the channel that she says for her mind's eye, why didn't I ask her for that $2,500? Why didn't I ask her for a buy-in from that? Why didn't I ask her, hey, we have expenses, let's pay for this? I never did, because that was not the agreement we had.
Chris, can I please point out that I have very much invested into this channel?
That's
Thank you.
irrelevant to what I just said.
All right.
Okay,
So
I don't
let's-
agree
let's-
that is irrelevant.
what you're doing is, Steve, it's not a channel.
sorry, Manya, this is not. You're here as a witness. I'm sorry. This is between Chesh and Steve, and we need to try and we can't have people interjecting on behalf.
I'm just trying to make it easier for Steve to understand, because I agree with Chesh. He's not understanding what she's saying.
I know,
respect,
but
I
you're not here
understand.
as Chesh's advocate.
I really do understand.
Actually, sorry, one bit of contention. I was told that I was allowed to bring Manya in as an advocate. So if that was a misunderstanding on somebody's part somewhere as a miscommunication, then that's some kind of miscommunication.
I honestly thought it was just going to be Dapper and Chris. Those are the only two names I mentioned.
During the call yesterday, it was asked if I could bring somebody with me, and you agreed to it,
Dapper.
Steve.
Yes, and I thought it was Dapper.
Why?
That's fine.
Right.
Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Okay, cool. Manya is here as an advocate. I'm
fine.
I'm good with that. If you're good with that, or if everyone's good with that, the only thing I ask is just we try and we don't want too many cooks to spoil the broth. I guess
I will just make one comment. It's quite evident that there's a breakdown in communication, and there's no resolving this.
I think she's right on that.
Both the parties are talking past each other at this point, and if I may dare say, kind of one party is talking for the other. Let's just say that.
One party is what?
Well,
one party is talking for the other.
Let's not.
You're talking past each other. Okay, let's take it this. Talking past each other. There's a major breakdown of communication here. Do you and I'm kind of now doubting as an outsider whether this partnership will work.
I don't think it will.
If there's such a big breakdown of communication on these basic things.
Not for the non sequitur show channel.
Chris,
I don't think for this particular agreement I think things have been changed. I think the agreement has been changed.
Right.
And I'm not. Yeah. So I think
I think we all agree there's a breakdown. Sorry, Chesh, you want to say?
I just wanted to point out that I am doing my best, but I think this has been unfair. I think I've been treated unfairly, especially the past 3 months. And that I would like to go over a bit of a financial breakdown of the jobs that I was doing, since apparently that's not being viewed as relevant as to my investment in the channel. So if I could do that, that would be... Steve, please, I thought we were letting Chris guide the conversation. So I would like to go over that because I think that there is a very large disparity or a lack of understanding on what the amount of work I was actually doing and have been doing actually is. Because if you understand the way this breaks down, I don't think anybody in their right mind would agree to not have any power but be a profit share. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, it makes sense to me because that's what the original was, and I've done just
Steve,
as much work.
please, why are you?
Hang on, I'm responding. I've been doing just as much work, and here's what
you don't know what I'm saying. Please, Chris, please.
All right, but Chris,
all right, hang on one second. I'm going to step in because it's now getting to the point where it's going to turn into a screaming match. We don't want that. So what I'm going to suggest is we can go through that, and I think that's something important that you do want to go through, Chesh. But I think also when it comes to something like this, we would have to, any agreement on any, I guess, negotiation on if the channel doesn't go forward on how that's resolved, I think would need to be tabled for a different time. We can't resolve that.
I think that's totally fair, and I think that there is, I will stand by that. I think that if Steve says 50-50 partner over and over and over again, and then he describes 50-50, but I have this, that's not 50-50. And I think that there is any feasible way someone can take a profit share when as compensation in a way that would be fair, when they have zero power or control over what is causing the profit, because this could end up in a very, very bad situation where Steve can literally do nothing, and the only way I get paid is if I do everything.
Yeah, I think if we can work something,
I'm not saying he would do that, by the way. I'm just saying, like, these
Yeah.
are hypotheticals of, like, this could go very,
Yeah.
very badly, very, very
and that's
quickly.
very that's a
responsibilities
fair
and roles
that's
for
a,
both of you.
yeah, that's a fair point. I'm just saying that I'm only willing, and this is non-negotiable, I'm only willing to pay fair compensation for the last 2 months that she has been actively participating on the Non Sequitur show. She gets 50% of all revenue from that, minus again the expenses, which she already agreed upon. That's all she would be fairly compensated for. Any prior thing to that, she's done on her own channel. I've done on my own channel. We put an equal amount on all that. There's nothing past that. I spent $5,000 of my own money to get the channel. She didn't put in a dime of that. So if she wants to call that an offset, which is not really the thing, that's fine, but it's not. So yeah, she can go through it, but I will not be paying her for anything other than the income for the last 2 months.
Can I get
non-negotiable.
Chris, can I please, for 1 second?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to put it on the record that Steve claimed that he was going to be amicable to negotiation, but is in fact not in any way, shape, or form at this point.
I am amicable to negotiation, but in a negotiation, you have to have certain things that you're not willing to negotiate on, and I'm pointing them out.
Well, let's. I think before we make decisions on what will or won't be accepted.
I just wanted to point that out for the record.
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's important to hear Chesh out, just so even if you don't agree, Steve, at least you've got an because it's
absolutely,
sometimes you can't always get an agreement, but to have an understanding helps, and potentially it can be moved in a different direction that works for both of you. But Chesh, let's run through that.
I also have one question that I just want to note down before I go through that real quick. I want to know why 50-50 with Kyle is different than 50-50 with me. As I was described, I don't want an answer right now. I just want that tabled. Thank you. Okay. So the description of what Steve has said on air, of what I have been doing and was doing for 2.5 to coming on 3 years now, has been PR management, personal assistant, and community manager for 2.5 years. I was doing this under the impression that I was going to get 50-50 of non sequitur totality, which includes that I would get a say in the things that go on. I'm not asking for an unreasonable say. I'm not asking to not be willing to have conversations back and forth about and hash things out. I have no problem with that. But it was under the impression that I had at least some kind of say, not he's got 100% of every say of what happens. Again, I will reiterate that I have no interest in arguing or saying that I ought to have ownership of the channel, because there can only be one owner. So if there was a misunderstanding and a breakdown in where Steve was saying, I retain 100% ownership of the channel, and I said, yeah, of course, there's only one ownership of the channel, I mean, that's fine, but I don't think it's fair to not be willing to negotiate based on the work that I've put in. So the numbers, as they break down, taking the median wage for each of those jobs, the low median wage for each of those jobs, then taking the median of those jobs together, comes up to, for 2 years, $120,000 Canadian. Now, please don't interrupt me. I mean, I don't appreciate that you're laughing, because I worked really hard for years.
That's just not. Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
I think now might be a good time to stop.
All right. Do we want to table this and come back to it, set a time?
No, I don't want to table it. I want a resolution, because at this point it's gone into absurdity.
No, I think if I can,
she's not ready to do, and I can hear Chesh. She's not in a good headspace.
All right, that's all right. If everybody agrees on that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think it's best to handle this with less emotion. I can hear that.
I agree.
Look, I understand, Steve, what Chesh is saying, and she's putting a quantifiable value on the work that she believes she's done. Now, I don't think that she's asking for that, but I think what she's saying is she wants you to understand that she believes that the work that she has put in does have a value, and she wants you to understand that and doesn't want that to be discounted.
There's always a value in work. However, when she has just said that, she didn't get a say. Of course, she got a say. I've asked her opinion on everything, on every decision. I have come to her and asked for her opinion. Her opinion has always been valuable. For her to say that, she wouldn't have a say makes absolutely no sense to me. She's had a say in every step of the way. I've always asked her. I've always valued her opinion. So when she says she doesn't get a say, I don't understand that. But my thing was that when it came to the absolute final decision making, that has to rest on one person. And that's what she had to dispute with.
I still have a recording of Steve saying the opposite of that.
But before we move forward here, Chesh, I'm just going to leave. Do you want to move forward now still, or do you want to just table it for, maybe we can have a 5-minute break?
I would like to come to. I'm not okay, so I would like to come to.
That's right, Chesh.
You know what? Yeah, let's take a quick break.
Yeah. All right. So what I'll do is we'll take a break. I'll just drop everyone out and I'll bring everyone back in. So it's saying it's at 55 minutes now. I'll bring everyone back in at the 1 hour mark. So I'll come on first and just say I'm bringing everyone back in. So I'll drop everyone out now and we'll do that.
Yep, fair.